You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 137. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers. Relational Discipleship. Are you ready to dive in? This is the first of a series of conversations that Tim and I have with pastors and local church leaders who are leading with courage and from their CliftonStrengths in this season of ministry. On today's conversation, you are going to be blessed by insights and information and transformation that Dave Warner has experienced in this season of ministry. He's going to share the challenging things, the beautiful things, and the way that God is using him and the team of leaders that he has the privilege of serving with in this time and space. So without any further wait, here's our conversation with Dave Warner.
Dave, to help the people who are listening get to know you just a minute, who are you and what do you get paid to do?
Well, my name is Dave Warner, and I'm the planting pastor of Engage Newark Church in downtown Newark, also the director of Little Arrows Play Cafe, which is our primary outlet of ministry into the community.
So how did you even get to the place of being a planting pastor? Just you didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to do this. So how did you get there?
Well, I think it was a long journey. It started probably 10 or 15 years before I ever got to plant a church. Always had the stir to do something different, a little unusual to the normal church mode of doing things. But God worked in me about 10 to 12 years before he gave us the idea of actually doing something. And our idea was to create a space where the people of Jesus who could meet the people who aren't yet of Jesus. And the way he led us to do that was through this Play Cafe idea. I mean, it took probably 3 years to really get it off the ground and get it going after the idea was seeded.
And what is a Play Cafe?
A Play Cafe, probably the simplest way to think of it is if you take the concept of Playland at the mall and then mash it up with a coffee shop, and then you have the idea. So you get a concentrated effort of parents to be there with the kids, like Playland at the mall. But then you have casual, relaxing space like a coffee shop. So we put those two together. And for us, I mean, there's a business model for that. There's lots of Play Cafes around, and there's several in the Columbus area. But as a nonprofit ministry, we do it so that we can connect with those parents. You know, on countless occasions, people come in, they bring in their kids, they see them playing safely in the play area. And then the mom just opens up to our volunteer staff member that's there. And after 20 minutes or so, the mom will say, I can't believe I just told you all that, as they just pour out their life and what's going on. And then we get to be Jesus to them in their moment of need.
So it in a way, and I'm just projecting here, you're actually developing the relationships, which allows you the opportunity to share something more.
Absolutely. That's not a projection. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is establish relationships. We call it relational discipleship. Build a relationship with them, be what they need to be, what they need us to be for them at that moment, and then invite them into a cultivated Jesus-style relationship where we can point them in a direction of Jesus.
So you just used the word discipleship. What does being a disciple of Jesus mean to you? What are we talking about?
I've looked at discipleship in general, and I've co-opted this phrase from somebody else that I couldn't tell you who the person is now, but it's this: being transformed in the image of Jesus Christ for the sake of others. So being transformed, that just means I can't do it on my own. Somebody else is transforming me. That's God transforming me, doing that work within me. I can't do that work, but I can put myself in the position where God can do it. And really, we look at our Play Cafe as one of those places where people can be transformed into the image of Jesus Christ. So we just look like Jesus, become like him in our thoughts and our words and our actions for the sake of others. It's not for myself so I can have some kind of great knowledge or all kinds of biblical wisdom, but it's just for other people so that we can continue to help others be transformed in the image of Jesus. And the cycle continues over and over.
I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, Dave, and we're going to come back to the discipleship piece. As Tim and I talked about bringing pastors on to have some conversation, part of what was running through the back of my mind is we have been in a season that what I have seen from our pastors and the pastors that I know is you all are exhibiting tremendous courage and leveraging what I see as your strengths in different and beautiful ways. This has been a crazy year for everyone, and yet you have unique gifts and talents. As I listen to you talk about the Play Cafe and what you're doing with families and children, that God has uniquely gifted you for this time and place in ministry and in leadership. And so we want to have a little conversation about how God has gifted you, and to do that through your top 5 Clifton strengths. So could you share with us what your top 5 are? And then we're going to have a little conversation about those and how leadership is happening in your life. And we'll circle back to that whole discipleship definition that you were just speaking of as well.
Sure thing. I have my 5 are maximizer, individualization, responsibility, achiever, and arranger. And they're not necessarily in that order because I couldn't remember what my top is and which order they're in. So those are my 5 and I function quite well in those. Also, they help me, but they also hinder me at times too, to be honest.
You are a good student of strengths. that is what can happen. Sometimes they get in our way. So how would you say that your top 5 are fueling you and your leadership in this season that we're living in?
Well, the arranger piece, being able to see situations and adapt with them. It's not quite adapting. That's a different strength, but making changes on the fly and just making it work. That's been a big help in this season. With the Play Cafe is our highly relational piece. That's a gathering space. Well, guess what's been shut down for basically 3 of the last 4 months?
Right.
We've had to rearrange that, and being able to pivot those things every so often has been helpful. My responsibility and achiever strengths, that's been difficult to have those 2 strengths this season because I feel like I have to do something and accomplish something. And a lot of what God's been showing me during this period of time is to just rest and be, and that it's okay. Sometimes accomplishment is resting. So those are some things that have been difficult. Individualization, that's just trying to put people where they can have success. And that's been changing as well over the last 3 or 4 months, seeing some of our staff members take on different roles because, we're not doing children's ministry right now. We're not doing youth ministry like we used to. So putting them in a position where they can be successful. And then, of course, that kind of number one maximizer, taking what I got, just making it better, or just here's the tools and things that are available to me. Here's the program. How can we make it work for what's now? And I think arranger and maximizer is just taking what we've got and making it just as good as I can make it. That's been like driving me. Fueling me, I guess is what you said, but driving me crazy at times, especially as we've learned online things, and we continue to relearn them.
So before Sarah asks another question, you and I were having a conversation recently, and part of your self-awareness of your strengths has allowed you to understand the strengths of others. So you said something that was very enlightening to me, and that is you try to surround yourself with people that have different strengths than you have. Would you say a little more about that?
Yeah, and I've thought more about that since our conversation. I need people around me that are probably more relational, and actually we have that. Our team just the team that we built to start the church just became they're just relational people. They're very high on those strengths. What I need and have a few close people are like the strategic and futurist. Like if they have an idea for what we can do, then my maximizer strength can make it better. You know, I may not have the original idea, but I can improve upon the original idea, if that makes sense. I don't think I'm like bragging on that. That's just the way I work. I don't have too many original thoughts, but I can make the old one better.
Our listeners can't see me smiling, but I'm smiling because, Dave, you just hit on part of the reason why Tim and I work so well together. Two of Tim's top 5 are strategic and futuristic, and I also have maximizer. And I can't tell you the number of times in 10 years that's exactly what happens. Tim will float something, and then I'll pick it up and I run with it. And sometimes he looks at me and says, well, that's not at all what I had imagined. And hopefully most of the time it's better, but sometimes I just go down a whole different lane. So yeah, that's the smile that, Dave, you're seeing right now, and our listeners can't see or hear me right now. Totally makes sense. The other thing that I loved about what you were talking about, Dave, with your strengths is how they play off of one another and really integrate, because they don't stand in isolation, but your arranger and individualization, how can you move those people into places of need and do it in the best possible way that you can, bringing in your maximizer. Beautiful expression of your strength. So thanks for sharing that with us and with your listeners. Tim, I think I might have jumped in on you. Did you have something else you wanted to ask Dave there?
All I wanted to make sure is that the people who are listening can know that whatever their strengths are, they can surround themselves with people that have different strengths. And how those do play together, there's a place for self-awareness in the midst of the relationship. So, and as you and I've talked in times past, that's part of what's being healthy, is having that self-awareness and then knowing how to work with the people around you. Dave, as far as I'm concerned, Dave, you've given us a great example of how that works.
Yeah, and I think just being honest with yourself, I guess you're calling it self-awareness. Like we just need to know where we have an area of lack. I don't know that weakness is the right word there, but I have a lack. I can't always see the future the way I think it ought to be there. So I need a friend who can do that, and then together we can figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, it's cliche, but we're better together.
Absolutely.
And allowing other people and creating the space for other people to leverage their strengths and use their gifts, it ends up being a win for both of you and the community that's around you. And sometimes I think as leaders, we don't stop and think about that in our areas that aren't as developed, or it's just not a part of who God created us to be, when we're willing to step aside and say, yeah, you know what, I can't do this and I really don't want to do this, but I see how you shine in this moment, that lights them up and gives them life and allows them to grow into who God has created them to be. And sometimes I think we overlook that and think that, well, as the leader, I should be able to do all of this. No, you shouldn't.
Yeah. You shouldn't, you shouldn't, and you can't.
So, Dave, you've answered part of this question, but again, part of what we've talked about, what Sarah and I've talked about on the podcast, is about learning and how we take next steps. And so, what have you learned about yourself through this pandemic, or as you used a good word, adapt to the changes? What have you learned?
Well, I think a thought that I had while Sarah was talking there was that we go through life and like we're driving, and when you change lanes, you have a blind spot, and to have somebody else there that can alert you, like, oh, there's a car there. You can't pull over right now. There's a car there. My wife is that person for me when we're driving. When she goes, I know I need to slow down or stop or whatever it is. We got to have somebody there to help us with our blind spots. And for me, sometimes I'll have a goal in mind of what I think is right to do, and I'm not mindful of how it may impact people, especially on that relational side, because I'm just going for accomplishment, achievement, taking on the thing to make something better without being mindful of how people might feel that this thing that I'm doing is impacting them. I don't know if I'm saying that properly, but so I'm learning to see those things, or learning to let other people show me those things without being offended myself. The other thing, and it's probably tied in there, in my maximizer role, I'm having to learn to be relaxed on how people do things. So my responsibility and achiever strengths will make me want to do things the way I think it ought to be done, but I need to individually let people express their ministry the way God's leading them to express it, rather than micromanaging and shoehorning them into the way that I would do it.
Well said.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Those are learning curves, okay? I'm not good at it. That's why I'm learning.
Well,
so let's turn the table a little bit. What do you celebrate God doing in your life or leadership in these let's just say the past 3 months?
It's been great the last 3 months seeing our team really just open up. As we've started to be able to gather again and have meetings face to face, not just on Zoom, it's been awesome to just see them really grapple with the realities of where we are as a community, and not just a church community, but the community as a whole, and then look for ways that we can meet those needs. And they really want to see our church grow and thrive. Back in the deeper parts of quarantine back in March and April, and I just felt so isolated because I wasn't seeing our people. We couldn't be together, and I sometimes just felt like I was the only one. I'm the only one that cares. I'm the only one. I'm just doing all this work, but it wasn't true. It wasn't true. They were there. They were doing what they needed to do as well. But they want our church community to not only survive but to thrive. And they want to be a difference maker in our community, and they're willing to invest in it, both financially and with their skills and talents and their time. So that's been a lot of fun to see that happen.
And you've kind of modeled with your leadership adaptability, so that even as they've made decisions through this pandemic, they've been able to adapt to different ways as well. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it is true. They weren't. I was saying back in May or June, somewhere in there, to our team, like, hey, we need to really invest in some online discipleship pieces and maybe even upgrade some of our equipment. They mostly wanted to just get back in person. In May, June, it was like, let's just do whatever we can to get back in person. We're going to be okay. And I was really disappointed in that because I don't think that in person is it's the long-term future, because I don't think humans are going to quit gathering, but we do need to have an online presence. Well, we did gather together, and we just kind of kept our online thing going, but by July, in mid-July, their tenor had changed, and they were ready to make significant investment in online pieces. So we're working on that now. So to say that we're really quickly adaptable isn't quite true, but they're willing to go there once they see the needs to go there, if that's the right way to say that.
Yeah, thank you.
To me, what you just said, Dave, if I can say it back to you, and then you can correct me, is the pacing as a leader that you set, sometimes you're ready to move quicker, and the people that you're leading aren't keeping pace with where you're at. They're at a different place. And so you had to go back, meet them where they were at before they could come to the place that they were ready to move forward and see the possibilities that you were talking about. Just two things. This is the coach in me coming out. That's very relational. So when you say that you're not relational, that's a very relational statement. So just pointing that out to you, that yes, you do have that ability and that in you. It just comes out in a different way.
Yeah, perhaps. What I learned from that is I need to communicate better and maybe be a little bit more patient with them. I just thought coming out of that May, June time period, I was pretty frustrated with them. It was the first time I'd been frustrated with this group of leaders. But I said to myself, okay, what is it that I need to do to lead differently in this to get them to the place where I think we need to go without just strong arming it or forcing it? That needs to be their decision, because it's their money. So how can I guide them in it? And honestly, I don't know that I did much different. I think God just said, okay, guys, you know that this in person isn't working. We have to double down on our online. And they came to that conclusion on their own.
Sometimes God does some rearranging that helps us out. More often than not, that's the case.
Yeah.
Dave, we've been talking about leadership. So as we continue down that path, what courageous decisions are you making right now as a leader?
Well, as I mentioned, we're heading into deepening our investment in online capabilities. So what we've kind of considered is to have our worship to be an in-person pop-up worship that will be recorded, and then we're going to post it online 2 times, one in the morning on Sundays, and then one in the evening at maybe even another day, so that we can capture our church folks and non-church folks that have children. We think from a gospel perspective that people who really need it from a non-Christian perspective, they're not surfing the web at 10:30 on Sunday morning. They're scrolling through after they put the kids to bed in the evening. So we want to try to capture that online audience, but then also to have it in person, and we can record it at any time and just to advertise where and when we're going to have our pop-up worship, and we record it and post it online. The next thing is discipleship. We've got this idea that we can do discipleship in a different way, in an interactive way, with video content that's on demand, where we're calling them discipleship flows, where they just go through a 2 to 3 minute video, then answer questions about it. And then a couple of days later, they'll get an email where they can move on to the next one. And some of that's just automatic, but we're going to have our team members walk through that journey with them so they can answer questions, and they'll have a partner that they can go through with those things. So we're working on those things. They're not all live yet, but that's where we're headed in the next 2 months or so, to do something different and to go where people are, which is online.
Thank you for sharing that around discipleship. And Tim and I would love to have more conversation with you about that, because as I have had conversations with pastors and church leaders, I know that is one of the places that, I don't want to say folks are struggling, but they're trying to innovate. And what does discipleship look like now, in this time and in the future? And it has to be a central part of what we're doing, but how that's working is all changing. So prayers for you as you continue to lead folks on that and as they get connected to that.
Yeah, thank you.
So Dave, when we first jumped on, you were talking to us about discipleship and how you're imagining that right now. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners about how discipleship is coming to life in your local congregation and the communities that you're responsible for, or in your own life?
Sure. Again, discipleship is being transformed in the image of Jesus Christ for the sake of others. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we put ourselves in a position where we can be transformed? For me, I do that in a number of different ways. Obviously, worship is a primary way, but daily I'm in the Word. I'm actually doing a 3-year through the Bible journaling series. So I'm just every day I'm reading and writing and praying through the Word over a 3-year period. But that's just me. That works for me, but that doesn't work for everybody. And nowadays it's hard to do in-person groups. I've led a lot of different small groups and huddles. Well, we're not doing those anymore, and I did enough Zoom ones to be sick of it and throw my computer out the window. I'm just tired of that. And most people are. They're really tired of doing those things. And it's effective, but those of us who know what in-person is like, we know that it's probably not as effective. So what does discipleship look like 1-to-1 or or 1-to-5 or whatever in COVID-19? And so that's why we're trying this online bit. We're really targeting people who have not yet had an in-person experience. Because I mentioned those of us who've experienced in-person before, we know that it's greater, but there's most people haven't yet experienced any in-person worship or discipleship. So online is all they know. So our idea is to connect with that through these discipleship flows. And then you'll have a virtual connection with a real person that would guide you through those flows. And that way, and maybe they could meet up in person at some point, because now it's 1-to-1. And we feel like that's a very Jesus way to do things. 1-to-1, 1-to-2, something like that. And we can do that safely in an era of COVID-19.
What a gift that you and your community are offering to others. And I look forward to hearing more about the fruit of your labor. So are you ready for what we're calling a rapid fire question? We've got 7 to 10 questions that are quick, fun, and off the cuff that we just want you to be able to share with our listeners a little bit about you. So are you ready?
Sure, let's go for it. Sounds scary, but I'm game.
I promise they're fun. And Tim and I are going to try and go back and forth here. So first question is your morning beverage of choice.
I'm an orange juice drinker. A little orange juice. I don't need coffee too often. So orange juice.
When was the last time you laughed? Really laughed?
Oh gosh, Tim. I love to laugh. Probably Sunday, I would guess, in worship. We had a good time in worship on Sunday.
What is your favorite or go-to Bible verse?
Philippians 2:5-11, especially verse 5, let this mind be in you, the same which is in Jesus Christ. And then it goes on to talk about what our mind should be like.
What was the last book you read?
Oh, besides a book of the Bible. I spent a lot of time reading that. Gosh, this is embarrassing. I can't even remember the name of it, but I'm working on a book now about banners, making banners that the church, something about like we make enemies of each other because of the banners that we fly, and it's kind of political in nature and how the church has divided itself politically. Gosh, I wish I could remember the name of that right now. I'm working on that one. I'm a slow reader. I kind of plod along through books and I get bored easily with them. That's a confession.
When did you get your first Bible?
I got my first Bible, must have been around 2nd or 3rd grade. I remember it clearly. It was a Precious Moments in KJV, mint green, and my parents wrote in it and everything. But I read that Bible through by the time I was in 6th grade.
Dave, what do most people misunderstand about you?
Maybe it's that I do love people. I really do. I love them unconditionally, despite the fact that I push them, and I'm always seeking. I come off as unsatisfied, but I'm happy with them the way they are, and I love them unconditionally. But probably my maximizer gets in the way of that sometimes.
Your least favorite household chore?
Trash duty. I hate taking out the trash, and I forget way too often. So, yeah, that's the worst one. And I'm not a good model at it, so I want the kids to do it, but if I can't even do it properly, how can I expect them to?
What's your favorite vacation spot?
We go to the mountains a lot. We're on a national park tour. We've been hitting national parks to get the kids to all those sites. My favorite one so far is Glacier out in Montana. I'd go back there in a heartbeat if I could. I'd live there if I could. Well, I wouldn't want to winter there, but I'd live there in the summer. It's so beautiful and just grand out there. Okay,
this one is a bit seasonal. Your favorite or worst Halloween costume from your childhood?
Well, we don't go out and do that. I think we were too Christian for that. So I only remember doing it once, and I was Big Bird with the big plastic face, and the little elastic strap that scratches your ears and pinches you. That's the only one I really remember.
Do you have one more? Let's end on this one because, why not end on junk food? What's your favorite snack food?
Oh, that's easy. Without a doubt, I'm a nacho cheese Dorito man all the way. And our congregation knows that. And every Christmas and birthday, they load me up with Doritos and Pepsi.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for joining us for this episode of LeaderCast. We are grateful for the time that you've taken out of your schedule to be with us and to share with our listeners the way that you're leading and guiding others to be more like Jesus in this season. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Tim. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on with you.
I trust that you were as blessed by this conversation as Tim and I were when we recorded it. So I'm wondering, what's your takeaway? Is it about relational discipleship? Is it that you need to dig into your CliftonStrengths a little bit more? Is it that you too are contemplating innovation? Whatever it is that you're walking away from with this episode, Tim and I pray that you remember that you're not alone, that you celebrate the giftedness of others that you have the privilege of leading with, but also that you reflect on how God has gifted you to lead others to make disciples of Jesus Christ. And that most of all, that you claim your unique talents. And even as you see those blind spots, as Dave was talking about, that you are encouraged that God is with you in this season and that there are a group of people all around you who are walking on this journey too. Stay encouraged. As always, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/137. Now go lead a movement of Jesus followers. Bye for now.